Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary Lore, where today we are looking at Tamio's story. Oh my gosh. I love this story. It's so good. So basically, this is how it starts. Let me just read it to you. It says, many eons ago, there was a great wizard by the name of Urza. So wise was he that all the mages of the multiverse flocked to him for advice. So powerful was he that only his brother Mishra stood as a potential rival. But Mishra hated him bitterly, and soon a war began. What? The Brothers' War. We're getting the Brothers' War. Now, here's what's cool. Okay, so a little bit of background before we even talk about what's happening here. Tamio, as a character, was non-interventionist. That was kind of her whole deal back on Innistrad. She didn't want to deal with the whole thing happening with the Emrakul and everything. She needed to just stay out of it. But she has 3 iron scrolls. Basically, scrolls that she hopes to never have to use. Last-ditch effort items, essentially. The first one was already used on Innistrad. It sealed away Emrakul. It used to be most likely a Saren's, like the story of Sarah's realm being collapsed as it was, but it was rewritten in a way by Emrakul so that they would fit into the whole deal and be contained on purpose again. But we still had 2 and we didn't know what they were. Here we see her, and she's reciting the story. It describes it as a story that she just listened to and saw, and she kept going through it, and it became part of her. So she's actually saying the story. She's reading from the scroll, this iron scroll, before she even takes it off. And it's describing her going through Kamigawa, watching people being absolutely obliterated by Phyrexians. And she's walking towards Boseiju, which is the giant tree that's over everything. And she's approaching it. She's moving towards it. And every step she takes, she's giving a little bit more information about this story, this whole deal. And she describes how Mishra's army had this oil that went through it, and how before when she used to read it, it made her feel like horrified. But now she sees it was a blessing. And then it talks about how Urza creates an heir from pure, unvarnished metal. He names him Karn. Now, this is interesting because, first of all, the first part of the story is a little inaccurate because it describes Urza as a wizard. He was originally an artificer. He did not use wizardry in any capacity. He was not his deal until he became a planeswalker. Secondly, he didn't name Karn. He thought Karn was a probe. But this is a story. This is a scroll that Tamio was basically had on her. And so she's telling the story. The same spark of creation that birthed him burns brightly in his breast. Karn, too, must create. As a sculptor chipping at marble, he shapes his world. When it is done, the creatures named and granted boons, the climate carefully crafted, the earth shaped and polished. He appoints his own successor, Memnarch, to oversee it. Super cool to see Memnarch brought back up. Memnarch was an original Phyrexian deal. He, even at the time of the story, when they initially made Mirrodin, and I plan on getting more into this when we eventually do, if we ever do, we will eventually do something with Mirrodin, like a Mirrodin set, Mirrodin series. But essentially, Mirrodin was originally designed to be like a futuristic set. It was supposed to take place like millennia in the future, and that's why everything is like made of silver and made of metal and chrome. And there's like a tenuous connection to Karn because it's actually supposed to be a world that evolved differently. In time, the more modern like retcon is that it was time dilation, and 1,000 of years can happen on Mirrodin while less time happens everywhere else. That's the running explanation for why everything is so weird. But essentially, Memnarch was being corrupted by the mycosynth, which was a little drop of oil that Karn had left on Mirrodin that was slowly turning metal fleshy, and that's why Memnarch had like a fleshy face and all this other stuff going on with his body. And so basically, it's a story talking about how Memnarch was slowly corrupted by the oil. It calls him the heir's heir, a copy of a copy, a faded image of Urza, and how he longs for power, and how he begins to pull all these people, and it talks about the soul traps, essentially. It's a really nice way of just kind of giving you real quick. It longs for its parents' ability to create. It longs to see more. Over years, it plucks life from this plane and that, settling them all within this garden, waiting for the flowers to come. And they do, but they aren't the flowers Memnarch expects. These bloom in black oil. Their choking roots wrap around that which is alive and whole. Soon, the whole garden drowns beneath the oil. The heir returns to discover his home has been torn asunder. So it's talking about when Karn returned back home to Mirrodin, and now the whole place is absolutely wrecked. And he's like, oh, no. And the thing is that the scroll that this story comes on, it's an iron scroll, iron bound. And it describes how Tamio, it basically is just like floating over everything. as she does, and she removes the silver ring from it, the iron ring. She drops it, and it crushes somebody's head. And she just keeps going, and she unfurls it, and it has Phyrexian text all the way across. So even the text itself is Phyrexianized, and she's reading from it, and her fingers are dripping oil across the text and blackening it, and the text starts to glow, and she's like basically just like recanting this entire tale, a tale of corruption, an idea of a world that is slowly and very basically unstoppably being encroached on by this oil. And as she speaks this into existence, the tree of Boseiju, basically the main, like the heart of Kamigawa, is rapidly corrupted, rapidly transformed, rapidly completed into a Phyrexian tree. And it's such an awesome visual to imagine. There's all these things falling from the sky. There's this oil just falling from all across the tree, coming out like sap from the trunk itself. And Tamio's floating there, and she's looking at everything she does, and there's just oil falling from her hands. And remember, this is her home. Now, at the same time all this is happening, you have Kaya here. You have Kaito. You have the Emperor. They're all here. They're all defending, and they see Tamio, and they're trying to figure out, how are we going to stop her? They're watching her. She's like reciting all these things. She's telling the story, and they're like, we got to stop her somehow. We got to do something. And so Kaya's like defending a kid, trying to save them. While all this is happening, Kaito's basically ready to do what he got to do, to kill Tamio. And then he sees Nashi. Now, if you don't remember, Nashi is the name of Tamio's son, the one who had earlier joined a biker gang and tried to fight Tezzeret, and Tezzeret was like, oh, she's coming. You're going to get to see her. You're going to love it. You're going to wish that I killed her. It's going to be bad. And so basically all that happens, and Nashi's like, I have to ask her. I have to try and reach her somehow. I know she's in there. She's my mom. There's a part of her that's still there. And so Kaito allows him an opportunity. They go to one of the only like uncorrupted branches of the Boseiju, and he brings Nashi up there, and Nashi's like, okay, look, Mom, I see you. I see what you're doing. It's not you. It's this whatever this is. You're not doing what you want to do. This is not you. This is bad. And Tamio, of course, is like, I'm gonna complete you now. You're gonna be part of a bigger family. It's gonna be great. You'll finally feel like you belong somewhere. And now she's like, that's upsetting. And so Kaito basically has to fight Tamio. And so now she allows it to happen because he can't really do anything else. And you see this whole thing happen where Kaito, Kaya, and the Wanderer are all having to work together to try and fight Tamio. And she's throwing like oil at people. She's throwing like all her weaponry. She's got scrolls going over the place. She binds Kaito up with the scrolls. All that stuff's happening. Tamio is a force to be reckoned with, but she's got 3 planeswalkers fighting against her. And in the end, there's a moment where Nashi is in basically right in front of Tamio, and Tamio reaches for one of her scrolls, and she slips off the ring. And the whole time she's been fighting, she's been saying something, but what she's not really saying it to anybody. She's just kind of muttering it to herself. They don't really understand what's going on. And in this one moment, the Wanderer is able to get one alpha strike in, because it's really cool. There's a moment where Kyodai shows up. Kyodai, of course, being the spirit of Kamigawa, the sister from when we talked about the Kamigawa story, that was basically one of the only ones that was she's the Emperor's spirit, essentially. She comes and she joins up with she gives a super Kamehameha boost to the Wanderer, and then she just goes and then cuts straight through Tamio and kills her. We actually see Tamio die. But what's cool is that the last thing she does is that spell, that last scroll, and the scroll goes off and it goes up, and there's just bluish green smoke that goes up into the air. And you're all like, oh, what's this? What's going on? What's going on? It turns out that the third ironbound scroll, the one she had hoped never to read, was essentially a backup AI story of her life. And so what we got is essentially a living tale, a scroll story that is Tamio. It is Tamio. It's her as a spirit. And she goes, she descends, and she hugs Nashi as a ghost, essentially, while the dead Tamio is on the ground. The fake Tamio, the Phyrexianized body that Tamio had left. And it's really interesting because it gives you a lot of little bits. There's the fact that she had essentially the ability to create a copy of herself if she ever needed to, in the event of her death. She had the ability to essentially cause an apocalyptic, just corruption spell which is weird because what would she have used it for beforehand? Was it going to instead be maybe the story of how Urza destroyed Yawgmoth? Would that scroll have actually been the perfect way to kill the Phyrexians? Would that have just eradicated the oil? Would this have been any other thing that would have made sense in this scenario? This was so epic. It was so cool. And again, they killed Tamio. We don't know what their plan is. They could just bring out an enchantment creature and its name is Tamio, and it's like, this is Tamio, or Tamio's memory, or whatever. And that's going to be like a recurring character on Kamigawa. Is it going to fuse with Nashi and like become like, they're going to be like, oh, a tag team duo, a Sultai card, whatever? I don't know. But it's a really cool idea. It's a really cool concept. And again, it's not a super long episode, I know, but that's basically what happens in this one. There's a lot of really cool fight scenes that take place, but the core of it is that the Tamio is defeated. Kamigawa is still being corrupted. There's still a bunch of terribleness happening, which is why Kaito and the Wanderer aren't going to be going to any of the locations. But that's what we're seeing here. It's just this place had its main lieutenant already defeated, and it's the 3rd episode. So that's going to be one of the problems we're going to see when we're going into each of these episodes, is that really you're only going to get a few, like one episode for every plane. With one episode for every plane, you're not going to get everything you want out of those, especially like let's say Kamigawa is your favorite plane. Well, too bad, we're done talking about it. You want to know about how the Kami are being completed? Oh, that's unfortunate. Maybe look at one of the cards. Oh, you want to see how the maybe the samurai Ronin and the samurai of the Empire are working together to stop. Oh, no, sorry, that's not happening. You do get to see on a card the epicness that is an ogre getting like basically corrupted and pulling souls up out of Tawashi. So that's awesome. But do you see this? No, it's not in the story. We just see Tamio talking about a story, and we see Boseiju completed. I'm hoping we do get to see that in the card, because that must look beautiful. It must look exceptionally messed up. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. This was this episode. It's a really cool episode just because it brings up all the old stuff about Urza and Karn and Memnarch, and the idea that there's like this lineage that's created. And thank you guys for watching. Tomorrow we'll be going even further, and we're going to look at Tyvar's story on Kaldheim. And I'm going to be including a little bit extra about Tyvar as well that is left out of the story. So that should be fun too. Until next time, travel well.